Now that our controls are in our position, we're now going to move on to connecting them until they can access the joints properly. Now, if you notice currently, if I select on one of my controls and I rotate it, none of the other controls move in response. And this is not how our joints are working. If I select on one of my back joints and I move it, you see how the whole back system moves together. We need to mimic this. And what we're going to do is we're just going to parent our controls together to mimic the same thing as our joints. So this is our hip. Our hip doesn't have anything else parented to it. So those systems are done. But our controls here need to be parented. So in other words, the head needs to be parented to the neck. So I can just go through and I can say, hey, neck, now head, middle mouse drag it right up onto the neck. So if I select the neck, the head will rotate and move like this. The next one is going to be the last back control, and that's going to be parented. The neck's going to be parented to that. So if I move the back, the neck moves. So I do neck into back. There we go. And I can just move those right up. So each one of these, 6 is going to be child of 5, which is going to be child of 4 and 3 and 2. So I can just middle mouse drag up, 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 up. And if I hold down shift on the plus, you see we got our whole hierarchy. Now, if I select my joints, you'll notice that my joints have that same hierarchy. It looks like a little step ladder going down like this. It's like click, 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 click. That's exactly what we want. Good. Okay, so we have our controls in our position, and our hips are not parented to our back. Those are going to be separate. They're two separate systems. If you notice, in our joints, my hip joint controls my lower body, but my back doesn't move with it. We're going to have a system that controls both of those together. Okay, so now that these are all parented together, they're all clean, we're ready to connect them into it. Now, we are not going to parent these into our joints. We're going to actually do something called a parent constraint. Now, a parent is actually moving our hierarchy. Did you see when we were actually parenting, our hierarchy changed and modified? A constraint just mimics this connection. It literally will make the connection and it will move along, but it won't actually change the hierarchy. So we're going to go into our animation menu, and I'm going to go into my constraints menu here. Now we see we have a parent constraint, and this is what we're going to start off with using today. So we're going to go into the options, and it's pretty much always when your default set, everything is set good. So I'm going to go and I'm going to reset just to make sure everything is default. So it's very important that this maintain offset is clicked on, because we're going to be talking about this a little more in depth later, but this is going to allow it to preserve the orientation from the control to the joint. Okay, so how does this work? I select the driving object first, where the object's going to influence, and then what's going to be driven last. So I'm going to shift select my first back joint, and I'm going to say apply. So let me do that again. It's going to be control, which is our driving object, and then the driven object last, which is our joint. Apply. Now, if you notice what happened here, that when I select on the joint itself, this is our back joint, you see how there are these blue bars here now on the joint? This means it's being constrained. It also means that this joint can never be animated now anything other than through this constraint. It's locked out. So my next joint on here has this too, and the third joint won't because we haven't constrained that yet. You also notice that if you select our control, you see how we see this purple? This is showing that it's being influenced indirectly. So if I see my other control, and then if I go up to my third control, we don't see that. Okay. So if I say controls my driver, my joints my driven, I hit apply. Controls my driver, joints my driven, I hit apply. Control, joint, apply. Control, joint, apply. And I'm going to keep on going up through my neck and through my head. Okay. So now if we had everything parented together properly, the head's moving, the neck's moving, the back is too, and I can actually shift select a bunch of joints, or a bunch of controls, sorry, and I can rotate, and you see the back moves and twists and rotates. It moves properly. Good. We do have to do the hips. I did not do that one yet. Control, which is our driving, and our driven is our hips. The sad thing is this is direct opposite of normal parenting. Normal parenting, it's all the children first and the parent last. In constraints, it's the driving objects first, and then the child is last. This will actually make more sense later on. Okay, cool. So our controls are done. Now let's say I accidentally did this in reverse order. Like let's say instead I selected the joint and then the control first. And that would be incorrect. So how do I delete a constraint? Well, first we go to the object that has the constraint on it. Like say for this object here. Matter of fact, I'm going to delete the constraints on all these objects. Here's the joint that has the constraints. I can hit F in my outliner to go right to it. And it's always going to be right underneath the joint that's being influenced. Do you see the little exclamation mark? This is our same constraints that we've been using for connecting our joints together, you know, for doing our indirect joint system. So now I can just delete this and then it goes away. So now the control does not manipulate the joints. So let me show you what happens when we do this in reverse order. If I select the joint and then the control and I hit apply, you'll see that now when I select my control, the control has the constraints on it. Now what this means is that if I animate this, if I rotate it, if anything influencing moves a little bit, it'll snap back to its original position. It's just like if we're keyframing. If we keyframe something in a certain position and then move the time slider, but then move it again and then don't forget to update it, it will just snap right back to its original position. So constraints can be pretty tricky on this. The main thing is if you see the blue bars, you know on the channel box, you know that it's actually connected. So what's pretty common also that students do is that when they are parenting all the controls together, like let's say I'm connecting the neck to the head and I just unparented it right there. What they'll do is they'll say, oh, I can just constrain these together. That works fine. Well, remember, constraints completely dominate the object they're connected to. So if I say, okay, my driver is going to be my neck and my driven is going to be my head, and I hit apply on this, you see the blue bars there? Well, that means that this control can't be animated. It's moving properly, but if I rotate my head, let me actually connect it up. I did not connect my head into my system yet. Okay. So if I rotate my head, my neck, and then I rotate my head like this, you see those blue bars? Now the second I actually move my neck, it's going to snap right back. So this is bad. We never want to, in most cases, we're not going to want to constrain controls to controls unless it's actually to a pad or to another system that's not going to be directly on the control. If anything needs to be animated, it can't be constrained. It can't have a constraint influencing it. It has to be clear. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to clear off my constraint off this control and reparent it back in. So I'm just going to middle mouse drag it right back under my neck. There we go. And how I'm going to grade this is I'll go through each control and I'll look to see to make sure the pivot point's on, that it's clean, and then it's actually, and I'll rotate and move around. Make sure you're actually rotating your controls to double check that they are doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm just moving around and undoing, because that's exactly how I'm going to go through a grade. I should see no translation value on the controls. They should be clean and named, and that's it for our controls in setting up and connecting them in.